So do I have it back on? I do, yes. Okay. I'm here by myself today. My wife is not with me. She had some surgery just a few days ago on her little finger. It's one of these, it's just kind of a little corrective type of thing. You should see the cast they put on that thing. I mean, it's massive. And so she's kind of lugging this thing around with her, and she opted out. She said, hey, no, maybe next time. So she'll be here with me, next week, but she's at home doing that. Also, I find myself in kind of an interesting place over these weeks here because I am also speaking at the Berkeley Church. So I'm going back and forth on this thing. So I hear both sides of this. Okay, I'm here. Hey, we're excited because Dennis is coming, yay! And then I come over here and go, oh yeah, Dennis is leaving. And then I go back over there, yay, Dennis is coming. So I kind of get a little bit of everything out of this thing. So interesting spot to be in. We had one of our friends over Friday evening, and it's a single gal that's she's got a lot of stuff going on in her life, and we were talking about that. We had a long evening and kind of just walked through a lot of that. Kind of a bottom line piece was that man, life is tough, and if you're young and don't get that yet, you will. Okay, life is hard there, and there's great things. When we come in on a morning like this, there's things to celebrate, and we want to be able to do that. Some of you are in kind of just a cool space of life right now, and yes, but life is tough, and there's a lot in it that is painful and struggling. I mean, we already mentioned the idea of the shootings. There was another one last night, Ohio, 9 dead. And we had the more local one that kind of brings a little closer to home here. And you think of those things, you go, wow, we live in a fallen, broken world. And after talking with this friend Friday night, I started thinking through all the conversations I'd had with people over this last week. Just this last week, the kinds of things people are wrestling with. Some that may touch a little bit of what you're going through. Had a conversation with one guy, just lost his job. Just came out of nowhere, boom. Downsized company, out of work. Had another person, a gal that's going through an intense legal thing that may totally change her life, depending how it works out. Another friend of ours, wife passed away unexpectedly. Boom. We had others that were going through various other kinds of struggles, marriage type of thing, going sideways. Another wife that I was talking to that just discovered that her husband's alcoholism has hit a tipping point. And it's just life. Now, as I look out at you, I mean, y'all look like you have not a care in the world. But I'm not dumb. I know that when we come together like this, we bring all the stuff of life with us. And hopefully, as we come before our Lord and we lay all of this before Him, we're saying, is there something you got from me here that will help me orient myself in this fallen, broken world and help me navigate through it? And we do. So what we're going to do this month, we're going to walk through a psalm, Psalm 46. So this is your cue. Start kind of making your way there. Okay, Psalm 46, and we'll be taking 3 weeks, this week, next week, and then the last week of the month. And this works out great because the psalm breaks into 3 parts, and so it's kind of just very convenient for us here. But this psalm, Psalm 46, was written during a time with God's people that they were facing a crisis, like of epic proportion. And this psalm was written specifically to address them walking through this crisis time. And so it gives us insight. It allows us to kind of not only absorb it. Remember, this is poetry. This is not just giving you data. It's put in poetic form so that we can absorb it differently. So we can think through some things. In fact, it was intended to be sung. So it goes not only into your head, but it goes into your heart and your soul and was intended to be woven into life. So with this, Psalm 46, and each week we're going to take another piece of this and unfold it. And each time there's a key insight that all of it can kind of get boiled down into. Here's the first one. I'm going to give it to you at the front end, and we'll repeat it enough so by the time we're done, you should be able to tell me this. Remember, I'm a professor, so I'm expecting you to there'll be a test at the end, and we'll find out if you got it. So this first section here that we're going to look at, the insight is this, that when you're going through difficult times, what matters most is not what you see, but what you know. Let me say it again. When you're going through difficult times, what matters most is not what you see, but what you know. My father-in-law, pastor for, almost 50 years, 47 years in Santa Cruz, had a lot of statements that he made that kind of became known as part of him. And one of the things he would say over and over again is the most important thing about anyone is what they believe. The most important feature about you is what you believe. And then he would add on, specifically, what you believe about God. Now, not what you believe I kind of agree with some things, but what you have settled in your heart is true about the God of our redemption. So, with that in mind, Psalm 46, if you haven't found it by now, you never will. So just kind of roll with it, Psalm 46, here's how it starts out. It says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth should change, and though the mountains slip into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains quake at its swelling pride. That's all the farther we're going. But as the song starts out, it zeroes in on bedrock for us. Three things that it says about God here that change everything. This is game changer stuff. Three things it says about the God of our redemption. I want to take these one at a time, and then I want us to absorb them. Because as I'm doing this, you should be asking yourself, do I believe this or not? Do I actually buy into this? Have I settled this in my heart? And if not, now's when you want to be able to do this. First thing he says, that God is our refuge. God is our refuge. When he's using this word here, he's talking about this idea of a place that we go for shelter. And when things go crazy, where do we go as a place that we can somehow feel secure, that we can go into? And it doesn't say that God will provide a refuge. It says, no, he is our refuge. Now, the picture that comes to my mind, maybe it's the same thing that's coming to your mind. A year ago, my wife and I were in France. And France has castles everywhere. You go out into the countryside, and you can almost kind of orient where you are by looking at a hillside and say, no, that's that castle, that's that castle. We even had dinner in one of the castles, which was great. But you get alongside this, and you see these big structures here with all the ramparts and all that kind of stuff. And during the time that these were constructed, these were the place of refuge. Everyone that lived around the area here, they could look up and say, okay, if anything happens, that's where I go. That's my refuge there. And the bigger the castle, the better, right? And hopefully it's kind of fortified and all that kind of stuff there. And then when an enemy would come, sound would take place, and everybody runs to the castle, they close it up, and they're safe in there. That's the idea. That's the picture of the word here. That God is himself our refuge. In fact, the word that's used here is a word that comes from the idea of a word that just simply means hope or trust. And by putting this one little letter added to it, it means it's a place of hope, a place of trust. It's a place that I go to and I feel secure in this. Keep your place here. Go a little bit farther. Psalm 61. Listen to this psalm as it kind of matches up with what we're talking about. Psalm 61, starting right at the beginning. It says, "Hear my cry, O God, give heed to my prayer. From the end of the earth I call to you when my heart is faint. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For you have been a refuge for me, a tower of strength against the enemy. Let me dwell in your tent forever. Let me take refuge in the shelter of your wings. Just take those 4 verses and just absorb them there. God is our refuge, our shelter. You believe that? Now, you don't have to raise your hand. Just kind of do it. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because that's key. It's a game changer. God is our refuge. Secondly, it says in here that God is our strength. Okay, we're back in Psalm 46 here. God is our refuge and strength. The word that's used here. Now, this is going to get kind of into this, and because as a psalm is being written, he's using the psalmist, plural, is using kind of exaggerated language here to kind of get the point across. He's our refuge. He is the place of our shelter and security, but then he's also our strength. And the word he uses here is not just strength as in, well, some of you can do this better than me, but it's not just like strength like I can lift a lot of weight or anything. It's a word that has a lot of spit to it. In fact, the way I've translated this word here is it's strength with an attitude. Okay, now, in order to get that, you have to almost see it play out. So here's what we're going to do. Okay, so I need a volunteer here, and it looks like you're the volunteer. Way to go. So I need you up here. I know you love being in the limelight, right? So he's right up here. Okay, this is good. Okay, right here with me here. And what's your name? Matthew. So here's Matthew up here. He's a great guy. If you don't know Matthew, he's great. But for the moment here, I want you to kind of play the role of the way the world treats us usually. So I want you to be as snarly a look and kind of spit attitude. Okay, can you do that? I know it's hard for you because you're such a great bunch of people here, but I want you to kind of do it at him. Okay, give him your worst look. That's all you can do. So you're not working with me, buddy. Okay, now give him that look. Give him that look. Okay, here's what that word means. Okay, get it? Okay, there you go. That's it. That's what the word means. It's that kind of strength. It's strength with an attitude where God said, "You don't mess with my people." And it captures that feel to the thing. Now, first of all, do you believe that God is your refuge? Mm-hmm. Do you believe that God is your strength? Mm-hmm. Okay. Some of you are still thinking about it. Strength with an attitude. Then you come to the last one here, the third piece in here. God is not only our refuge and not only our strength, He's our help. Now, that word that is used there, help, can sound a little bit weak. But it's a word that is used uniquely through the Scriptures, Old Testament. One place that I run into kind of issues with this word is when I do premarital counseling, which I don't do a lot of that anymore. I push that all off to Josh. It's a lot of work. But if I'm meeting with a young couple and we're talking kind of here's scripture and how to orient your marriage and pieces in, here's the roles in marriage. And I look at the guy and say, look, like it or not, buddy, you're to be the leader of your home and you better kind of rise to this thing. And then I look at the gal and I say, and your role is to be the helper and you should see the looks I get. What you talking about, helper? Man, it sounds like leader and helper, like a diminished value type of term. You know what I'm talking about? That's another one of those, mm-hmm. Until this bride-to-be discovers what that word means. This word, as you go through the Old Testament, is used outside of Genesis, where it introduces the woman as the helper. It's used almost exclusively of God Himself. God reserves it. It's used of God himself when God comes to the rescue of his people when they've run out of resources and there's nothing left they can do. And then it says, God, the helper comes. Pow. See what I'm talking about? It's kind of a cool title, right? You come into the New Testament, helper is used of what? The Holy Spirit. It's a term that God reserves for a unique role in life. Okay, so that's the word he's using here. He's our help. The one who comes when we run out of resources. We've run out of all things that we can do to somehow fix our life and put it all together here. And we say, God, I give up. I can't do this thing. It's bigger than me. God says, okay, now we're in business. Now I'm ready to work. But look, this is the one that he amplifies in here. He says that, the psalmist says that he's a very present help in trouble. Now you got to add all those pieces into it. Because you take it apart a bit more here, and that word trouble is, we get the word trouble, right? We're all familiar with what trouble looks like. But the word that's used here for trouble carries a lot to it. It can not only mean disturbed life and things not going the way you want, but it can also get this idea of running into adversity in life. Something pushes back on you. It can carry the idea of distress. But it ultimately means this. It means tight. It's this idea when life squeezes in on you and it gets tight there. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. You've been there, right? You know what that is. When life closes in and says that he's a help. But not only that, a very present help in the midst of that. And that carries even more to it because intense words he's using here. The idea of a very present help carries the idea of intensive, exceeding, mighty. And the word present there is not just that God is here, but is enough. In fact, the word that's used there not only means present, but means to be enough. To put it all together, that God, in the midst of what you're going through, is intensely present. He's fully in. And he is more than enough. You believe that? Mm-hmm. It's a game changer. These three pieces he puts in here. That God is our refuge. He is our strength. He is our help. And because of that, then he goes to the therefore. It's like he goes, this plus this plus this equals. Because of this, he says, therefore, we will not fear. You see that? You're looking at it? Mark it, write it, circle, whatever. We will not fear. Now, when life happens, and you run into those times in life where you're struggling through something, it's a crisis, whatever, conflict of some kind. When you're going through those things, one of our natural responses to those is fear, and to some degree that's legit. There's yikes, But when he uses this word here, he's not just talking about our natural response to things. He's using a word here that carries the idea of panic. It carries the idea of meltdown. It's that paralyzing thing where you look at life and it stops you in your tracks. It's that kind of fear that causes us to do strange things and make bad decisions. That kind of fear. We will not fear. If fear runs the show, if that's what dominates your thoughts, it starts to write its own story. Fear tends to be kind of almost like a form of meditation, where we get into something and life has closed in on us, and as we look at it, we start to imagine what could happen in the future. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Okay, there's another one. Okay, we all do that. If you don't do it really well in the day, wait till the nighttime. You wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly everything is huge, right? It's kind of that, it's a form, we meditate, we think about it, all this kind of stuff starts to drive our life. And it's kind of an unintentional storytelling where we make up our story into the future. It panics us. So we will not fear. What's the opposite of fear? Well, some words that could be dropped into the opposite of fear would be things like calm, confident, trust, peace, all those things that we long for to be kind of ongoing in our life. But because of what we know about God, it changes everything in us. Just jot this one down. Okay, if you look at Psalm 112, Psalm 112, verse 7. First 6 verses talk about the idea of the one who has put his trust in the God of our redemption in the midst of the darkness of life and all this kind of stuff. And then it comes down to this statement here. This is out of the Living Bible. This is the best, because I found this says it probably best. It says that such a person, in other words, the one who's already figured out who God is in this and has kind of pre-thought things, it says this, that he does not fear bad news nor live in dread of what may happen. For he has settled in his mind, key statement, he has settled in his mind that God will take care of him. That's the deal. Now, before we even move farther into this, get how this is laid out here. Because first of all, it gives us bedrock. Here's who God is. Therefore, we will not fear. It's not saying that as we go through life, if you have this relationship with God and you trust him, bad things won't happen. If someone tried to sell you that idea, you need to go back to them and get your money back. Because it doesn't work that way. God does not give us a get-out-of-trouble-free card. We walk through the same kinds of things that everyone else in this life walks through. Struggles and crises. But what makes the difference in walking through it is pre-thinking how you're going to do that. And that's what the psalm does. It says, first of all, get it in your head who God is and what God offers to us. Therefore, we will not fear. And that's before he ever mentions the problems. So you're pre-thinking how you'll walk through things. Now, with that in mind, he gives us 4 scenarios. Okay? In other words, 4 places to drop this into. In order to understand what's being said here, you really have to keep in mind that this is Hebrew poetry. Hebrew poetry. It's in poetic language here. And so there's imagery that is being given to us, not geographic or geologic scenarios. So it's life he's talking about. 4 scenarios of life. And the first one's this. It says, we will not fear. And then verse 2 here. We will not fear. Though the earth, the whole earth should change. Though everything, the whole landscape, everything changes. And he's not talking about, again, some cosmic thing and the world changes. Not it. He's talking about realities of life. Though everything in life should somehow, boom, it changes. Maybe you know what I'm talking about firsthand. All it takes is one phone call, and life changes. And everything the way it was is no longer the same. A year ago, one phone call to me, doctor says, you have cancer. And not just any cancer, you have a deadly form of cancer. That part of the conversation took 30 seconds, and everything changed. A friend of mine, a week ago, your wife just passed away. Boom. Conversation was 30 seconds long. Changed. Any number of things can do that. And it changes. But the psalmist here says, though the whole earth should change, though life as we know it now changes, we will not fear. See it? Second one on it. Though the mountains should slip into the heart of the sea. Not talking about mountains disappearing. It's not it. Remember, it's poetry. In order to get it, you kind of have to step back into the world of those who first heard this type of thing. And mountains had a couple of symbolic uses in poetry, Hebrew poetry. One was that mountains were a symbol of strength. You can find that over and over again in the Old Testament. They're a symbol of strength. And so as the psalmist says this, it's kind of like saying, so those symbols of strength in your life, if those all vanish on you, those symbols of strength, one might even be yourself. I'm on this. I've got this. And you realize you don't. That symbol of strength is gone. But probably more often, at least my experience would be, those symbols of strength may be those people in your life that have been those strong people. The one that whenever your life kind of goes crazy, that I can go to somebody, I can go to Matthew here and know that he's my strength. The psalmist says, though those mountains disappear, we will not fear. Now, mountains were also used not only as a symbol of strength, but they were used as a way of orienting yourself in life. You see it all the time. You read through the Old Testament, and often how they would locate a village or a town or whatever like that, they'd say it's between this mountain and this mountain. Or if you travel, you go all through these mountains here. And if you're actually traveling in Old Testament times through this land here, that's how you would navigate. You know that mountain, you know that mountain, you know that mountain. And so I know where I am. I get it. I can orient myself in life. I know how it works. And the psalm says, though the mountains disappear, though everything you've used to orient yourself in life, the ways you figured out this is how it works, and now they're gone, we will not fear. See where it's going? Kind of get the scenario of things? Okay, we got two more. Next one, though the waters roar and foam. It's kind of the ocean. I live in Santa Cruz. And during the winter, there's certain times, and my wife and I love going down to out where the lighthouse is, if you're familiar with it. Okay, we go out there, and in the midst of the storms, you see the ocean just going nuts, right? Crazy, crashing all over the place, and there's foam coming over and all this kind of stuff, which is a great picture of this right here. But there's times when life seems that way, right? When life seems like it's just crazy. And everything is kind of tossed all around, and you want somehow just to have this everything just smoothed out, and it's not. And you're in the middle of it, and as you are in the middle of it, you want something to grab a hold of. And the psalm says, even though the ocean crashes around and life looks this way, we will not fear. One last one on it. Return of the mountains again. It says, though the mountains quake at its swelling pride. We get this one. We live in California. It's kind of an earthquake idea. Though the very ground beneath your feet seems to shake and nothing seems stable, we will not fear. So what he's done here in writing the psalm is to create these scenarios of life, not give specific instance, but say life feels this way, and this is what happens in life, and these things. In the midst of it all, the game changer is not what you see, but what you know. And specifically what you know about God, that you anchor onto that. That the one thing that is stable throughout everything, the one that is consistent throughout, the one who is our stronghold, our strength, and our help is God himself. And as those who have found redemption through Jesus into this relationship with God, that's where we go. God is not out to change everything for us and make the mountains stay in place and smooth the water out, but says, no, in the midst of those, I am still the God that I am. And that's where you go. It's not what you see, because what you see will always distort reality. It's what you know, and what you know specifically about God. Now let's bring it all together here. and distill it into some things. 4 things. Okay, this kind of brings it all together here. First of all, life is filled with drama and trauma. No one escapes. It's just a reality. So that's kind of live with that one. If you're hoping that somehow it won't happen, got to get over that one. Life happens, and it's inescapable. Secondly, our natural response to it is fear. That's just how it is. And some of that's okay. I mean, we should kind of have that little bit of yikesness, you know. But not the kind of fear that debilitates us. The panic of life. Third, as those who have found redemption through Jesus into this relationship, we have an alternative to fear, a legitimate alternative. Last, we access that alternative. We access that alternative by deciding what we will believe about God. That's where we get inside this thing. What is true about him? Who is he? What does he offer us? And we go back to that place there. Not for something else, but to him. For he is indeed our refuge, our strength, and our help. Let's pray. As we're just kind of stepping into prayer, I'm going to ask that you just think of your own scenarios right now. The kinds of things that you're walking through, the kinds of things that you kind of anticipate coming into, all of life here. And choose at this point, it's kind of this pre-thinking or even thinking in the midst of it. What do I know is true? What do I know is true about my God? And settle in your own mind that God is who he is and that he will take care of you. Our Father, we thank you for the privilege of being here, for the privilege of lifting our voice in song, the privilege of talking to you in prayer, the privilege of looking into your word and allowing you to speak to us through it. Our Father, in the midst of life as we encounter it, we desire to be those who don't have meltdowns, who don't simply panic in it, but we find ourselves drawn closer to you, caught up in your arms, feeling your strength, knowing the reality of who you are. We thank you for that privilege of doing that in Jesus' name.